If you've got an older car, you know how difficult it is to get it smogged. And if it's from out of state, you can run into roadblocks you've never dreamed of. 7 on Your Side's Michael Finney joins us now with the story of one couple's battle with state officials over this exact issue.
This is really something else. Wait till you hear this one. California's smog laws are stringent. You know that if you've ever tried to smog a car. And if you have a question about those laws, you'll have to call the State Office of Consumer Affairs. That's the central hotline for the Bureau of Automotive Repair and dozens of other state regulatory agencies. Operators are standing by to answer your calls, but what happens if you don't get the right information? Becky McFarland's had a tough time getting a smog certificate for her 1979 Mazda. She and her husband just moved back to California from the state of Maryland. They knew the car needed work before passing a smog test.
I spoke with someone at the DMV, and they referred me to Consumer Affairs, and they said there's a $450 limit to be spent, and if that's met, then, and your car still doesn't pass, a waiver is given for a year.
Not true. Most cars do automatically get a smog waiver if the owner spends that much on repairs. But a change in the smog law exempts out-of-state cars from waivers. But the McFarlands didn't know that, and they say neither did the operators at the State Office of Consumer Affairs.
My husband and I both talked at different times to them, and they relayed the same information both times.
Several mechanics looked at the car. None knew of the change in smog law.
This is what is posted at the dealerships and repair facilities, and it says nothing about out-of-state vehicles.
The McFarlands spent $822 in repair. The car still failed 2 smog tests. The McFarlands turned to the Bureau of Automotive Repair, hoping to get a waiver. Instead, they got bad news.
And he said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but since you're coming from out of state, that $450 limit doesn't apply, and no waiver can be given. So you're basically left with a car that we can't register unless you put more money into it.
Now, had they known that, the McFarlands wouldn't have spent the $800 in the first place. They were stuck with a car they couldn't register, so they turned to 7 on Your Side. We talked to officials from the Bureau of Automotive Repair. They kept insisting the McFarlands were simply out of luck, that their mechanic should have known about the law change. Our questions went all the way to Sacramento. How can you expect mechanics to know if the State Office of Consumer Affairs isn't even giving out the right information? Good question, don't you think? The Bureau of Automotive Repair says this is an isolated case. Information does slip through the cracks. But because 7 on Your Side got involved, the state did something rather unusual. State officials picked up the McFarland's car from their San Francisco home and took it to their Hayward facility. A factory-trained expert found the problem that several other mechanics couldn't.
He found a leak in the exhaust system, and they felt it was a fairly minor repair, and they were able to fix it, and the car passed.
The McFarland's Mazda passed the test with flying colors. They got the smog certificate required to register the car. They're grateful that the Bureau of Automotive Repair went out of its way to clear up the situation. Otherwise,
you're stuck. It's not really worth anything because you can't register it, and so you're forced to just junk it or give it away to a charity.
You can bet the mechanics that looked at the McFarland's car now know the law, and hopefully they'll be telling any out-of-state residents up front about that no-emission cost waiver. And we've checked with the State Office Consumer Affairs 800 line. Operators are now giving out the correct information. Now, if you have problems with smogging or any other consumer problem you'd like us to look into, write to 7 on Your Side, 900 Front Street, San Francisco, now 494111. Now we have an update on a story we've been following here at 7 on Your Side. The State Air Resources Board today recommended that California cut back its mandate to sell thousands of electric cars by 1998. The Federal Clean Air Act had called for 2% of all cars sold by 1998 to be battery-powered, going up 10% by the year 2003. State officials cut that number in half.
The ARB is just about ready to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. We've made these auto manufacturers prove that they can produce a car that works, and now we're going to let them off the hook so that they really don't have to do it in the near term, and that could mean we don't ever get a car that doesn't pollute.
Chalk up a win for the oil industry, chalk up a win for the auto industry, chalk up a big loss for environmentalists they got beat like a gong today.
And
Yeah,
consumers, anything consumers can do about it?
You know, nothing's ever final. This was just staff recommendation. I should make that clear. There hasn't been a total vote yet, so I'm sure environmentalists are going to be out there really beating the band. But I got to tell you, so far, they're not getting much input on this thing. I mean, the law was, you know, the regulations were passed, and ever since then, we've been watching this slide. So that's where we are today.
Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
Coming up next, Martin White with today's sports news.